February 2nd, 1980, Santa Fe, New Mexico. What began as another tense night in an overcrowded penitentiary would spiral into 36 hours of chaos that shocked the entire nation. Behind concrete walls and steel bars, a powder keg of rage, desperation, and systematic failures was about to explode in the most devastating prison uprising America had ever witnessed. By the time the smoke cleared and the National Guard restored order, 33 inmates would be dead, countless others injured, and the very foundation of the American prison system would be called into question. This is the story of how a broken system created monsters, and how those monsters turned on each other in ways that still haunt corrections officials today. A system on the brink. The New Mexico State Penitentiary in Santa Fe was a disaster waiting to happen long before that fateful February morning. Built to house 900 inmates, the facility was bursting at the seams with over 1,200 prisoners by 1980. But overcrowding was just the tip of the iceberg in a system rotting from within. Guards walked corridors where the stench of human waste mixed with the metallic smell of fear. Cells designed for one person held 2 or 3 inmates, creating a pressure cooker of territorial disputes and sexual violence. The facility operated with a chronic shortage of correctional officers, forcing inexperienced staff to manage dangerous situations they were never trained to handle. Many guards were barely out of high school, earning minimum wage to control some of New Mexico's most violent criminals. The prison's leadership had implemented what they called an informant system, a network of inmates who reported on their fellow prisoners in exchange for better treatment, extra privileges, or early parole consideration. These so-called snitches lived in constant fear, knowing that discovery meant certain retaliation from other inmates. The administration relied heavily on these informants to maintain order, creating a culture of mistrust and paranoia that permeated every cell block. Medical care was virtually non-existent. Educational programs had been slashed due to budget cuts, and recreational activities were limited to occasional television time in overcrowded common areas. Inmates spent up to 22 hours per day locked in their cells with nothing to do but think about their grievances and plan revenge against those who had wronged them. The food was barely edible, sanitation was deplorable, and basic human dignity seemed to evaporate the moment someone walked through those prison gates. Violent incidents between inmates were rising steadily, but administrators consistently downplayed the severity of the situation to state officials and the media. What made conditions even more explosive was the complete breakdown of protective custody protocols. Vulnerable inmates, those who had testified against others or owed debts, were often housed in general population due to space constraints. This created a hunting ground where predators could easily find their prey, and where settling scores became a daily reality that guards either couldn't or wouldn't prevent. By early 1980, even veteran correction officers could sense that something catastrophic was brewing within those concrete walls. The spark that ignited hell. The night of February 1st started like any other at the Santa Fe Penitentiary, but a series of seemingly minor incidents would cascade into unprecedented chaos. During the evening shift change, a routine shakedown in Cell Block 4 discovered homemade weapons and contraband alcohol, leading to the lockdown of several inmates who had been planning a weekend celebration. These confined prisoners included some of the facility's most influential inmates, men who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Their sudden isolation created a power vacuum that other factions quickly moved to fill, setting off a chain reaction of territorial disputes and score settling that the administration failed to recognize. Around 1:20 a.m. on February 2nd, 2 inmates in Cell Block 1 overpowered a guard during what should have been a routine cell check. The officer had made a critical error. He had unlocked the cell door before backup arrived, a violation of basic security protocol that would prove catastrophic. Within minutes, the inmates had seized his keys and radio, cutting off his communication with the central control room. But instead of using this opportunity to escape, something much darker began to unfold. The inmates who had taken control discovered a list of informants hidden in the guard's possession, names of prisoners who had been feeding information to the administration about planned escapes, drug operations, and internal conflicts. This discovery transformed what might have been a simple escape attempt into a mission of revenge that would consume the entire facility. Word spread through the prison's informal communication network like wildfire. Inmates began using improvised signals, banging on pipes, shouting code words, and passing messages through ventilation systems to coordinate what was rapidly becoming a facility-wide uprising. The few guards on duty were quickly overwhelmed as multiple cell blocks simultaneously erupted in violence. By 2 a.m., inmates had gained control of 4 of the prison's 6 major housing units. They had taken 12 correctional officers hostage and had access to master keys that opened virtually every door in the facility. The administration's worst nightmare was unfolding in real time, but the true horror was only beginning. What happened next would transform the Santa Fe Penitentiary from a house of correction into a chamber of horrors that would shock the conscience of the entire nation. When prisoners became predators. As dawn broke over Santa Fe, the inmates had transformed the penitentiary into their own violent kingdom, but their rage targeted fellow prisoners far more than their captors. The hostage guards, while terrified, found themselves in an unexpected position. They became protective shields that potentially saved their lives as inmates focused their fury on settling long-simmering grudges with each other. The informant list discovered during the initial takeover became a death warrant for dozens of prisoners. Inmates who had cooperated with authorities were hunted through corridors and dragged from hiding places in a systematic campaign of retribution that revealed the true depth of hatred festering within the prison walls. The violence that followed defied comprehension as years of suppressed rage exploded in ways that prison officials had never imagined possible. What made the situation particularly horrifying was how quickly the uprising devolved into tribal warfare. Different gangs and ethnic groups that had maintained uneasy truces under normal circumstances suddenly found themselves in life-or-death struggles for territory and resources. The prison's informal power structure completely collapsed, replaced by the most primitive form of survival of the fittest. Inmates gained access to the prison's workshop areas, where they fashioned crude but deadly weapons from everyday items. Blowtorches became instruments of torture, kitchen knives were transformed into surgical tools of revenge, and even common cleaning supplies were weaponized in ways that demonstrated both creativity and cruelty that shocked even hardened law enforcement officials. The hostage guards reported later that many inmates seemed to have completely lost touch with reality during these hours. Some prisoners who had never shown violent tendencies suddenly participated in acts that defied explanation. The breakdown of social order had unleashed something primal and terrifying that lurked beneath the surface of institutional life. Outside the prison walls, families of both guards and inmates gathered as news of the uprising spread. Television crews arrived to broadcast live updates, while state officials scrambled to understand how their correctional system had failed so catastrophically. Governor Bruce King was briefed hourly on the deteriorating situation, as it became clear that negotiation was impossible with inmates who seemed more interested in destroying each other than securing their freedom. The question now facing authorities was whether they could end this nightmare before it consumed everyone trapped inside those concrete walls. By February 3rd, conditions inside the Santa Fe Penitentiary had collapsed. State officials realized negotiation was pointless when inmates seemed consumed by fighting each other rather than bargaining. Governor Bruce King made the hard choice to call in the National Guard, knowing every hour of delay meant more deaths. At 9 a.m., guardsmen launched their assault, using tear gas and coordinated entry tactics to clear the prison block by block. What they found stunned even veterans of overseas combat. The destruction and brutality surpassed anything in their training, forcing many to face the darkest sides of human behavior. Paramedics described scenes that would haunt them for life. 33 inmates were dead, and hundreds more needed urgent care for burns, beatings, and wounds too severe to classify. None of the hostage guards were killed, though many suffered deep psychological scars. In the aftermath, investigators uncovered failures that had been ignored for years: overcrowding, understaffing, poor medical care, and a dangerous reliance on informants. These issues had long been known to officials, yet little had been done. The riot became a turning point for prison reform nationwide. New measures were introduced to better protect vulnerable populations, manage informants, and ensure adequate staffing. The tragedy revealed that stripping prisoners of dignity ultimately endangered guards and staff as much as inmates themselves. More importantly, the Santa Fe uprising forced Americans to question what their justice system had created. But what's your reaction to the brutality of the New Mexico Prison Riot? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more history that shocks the world.